what age. Even collegiate students struggle sitting in front of a computer having to follow a class all day. And now you want 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds and high school kids to do it. They're not growing mentally the way they should be growing. And it's really sad because there are going to be some setbacks and some lost years because of this.
Right. So, so my first question to you is, when did you get interested in playing football, and who was your biggest influencer in that?
Yeah, it really started at a young age for me. My dad was a college football coach, junior college, in my hometown of Gilroy. Mm-hmm. He was the head football coach at Gavilan Junior College. And it was something that I just grew up around. My brother and I would be dropped off at his practices. When my mom was probably tired of dealing with us, she would drop us off at his practices, and we'd run around, we'd hang out, we'd throw the ball around, we'd steal the football when it was set down for them to run plays. And we grew up with those 18, 19, 20-year-old young men being like our idols, our big brothers. Right. And, you know, from an early age, I just knew it was something that I enjoyed doing. I played all sports, though. Hey, I started playing soccer at 5 years old, t-ball at 5 years old, then I basketball, and then football. When I turned 9 years old, I was able to play Pop Warner football at the time, and I joined a league and started playing tackle football at 9 years old. I wasn't a quarterback. I was just still trying to figure out my position in the game, but having grown up around the game definitely helped my abilities to process the game, even though maybe my athletic ability wasn't quite as good or there yet. I was able to mentally be ahead of the game. But yeah, it started young, man. And then my grandfather on my mom's side, my grandpa, my mom's dad, he had a stint in professional football. He played college football at Kansas State. He played in the East-West Shrine All-Star game back in the 1930s. And then I played in the East-West Shrine in 1994. So we were the first and maybe still the only grandfather-grandson combo to play in the game. But, you know, he was a big, strong bull of a man, 6'1", 220 pounds. And he had a brief stint in the old Pacific Coast Professional League with the LA Bulldogs back in like the 1940s. And then World War II was going on. And so they had their first son, and he gave up football. He probably wasn't making much money. And they had their first child, and he's like, I'm going to join the service, and I got to raise a family, you know? And so he stopped playing after 3 or 4 years. But, you know, so it was in the blood. You know, my mom's side, her brothers played high school football. They were actually my dad's teammate in high school, and they all played for my grandpa, who was the high school football coach at Gilroy High School. Yeah. So it was just like in the family. Before my dad even knew that these would be his brother-in-laws, he was teammates with them on the football field.
Yeah, so obviously, who did you look up to as a longtime quarterback when you were growing up? And was it Joe Montana or someone else that you looked up to while growing up?
Yeah, growing up in Gilroy, which is about an hour south, 70 miles south of San Francisco, and about 70 miles south of Oakland. And so I grew up in those days where in the 70s, Oakland was awesome. They were beasts, you know. They were the hated, just like they are today. They were the hated team around the NFL, but they had Ken Stabler, the Snake. They had Cliff Branch, Mark Van Egan, Lester Hayes, all the great players from the late 70s and into the 80s, and some great teams, some Super Bowl teams. So, you know, I remember reading the book, and I probably shouldn't have read it at such a young age, right, but They Call Me the Snake, and it was the Ken Stabler like autobiography, right? And it talked about his partying days with the Raiders and how crazy they were and all this stuff. And I was probably 8 or 9 years old when I read this. But, you know, I was a fan of just Bay Area sports. I was a fan of the Raiders. I was a fan of the Oakland A's, the Giants, the Warriors, the Niners. But then in the 80s, that's when Joe Montana came around, and Bill Walsh and all the great players that played for the San Francisco 49ers. And really growing up, Joe Montana was my idol. He was the guy that I wanted to emulate, that I looked up to, that I wanted to follow. And he really inspired me as far as wanting to play the quarterback position and trying to be better at being a leader for my team and a better player on the field and all those things.
So obviously, how many offers did you get coming out of high school, and what made you choose San Jose State? Obviously, obviously staying home it was a major factor, right?
Yeah. So. Well, that's the thing. So coming out of high school, I was not highly recruited. So this is what happened. My junior year, I had a pretty decent year. You know, back then teams weren't spreading it out and throwing it like they are today. You watch high school football today, and it's kind of like what the colleges do. They spread it out, empty the backfield. They're in shotgun, and they're throwing, 60, 70 times, like 70% of the time during a game. In high school, when I was in high school, they were evolving, but we were predominantly a run team, and then we'd throw it 15 times a game or so. So my junior year of high school, I threw for 1,500 yards and I don't even remember, 18 touchdowns maybe something like that. And I was getting some letters. I was getting, some notice, but not from any major schools. And so then my senior year really was focused on having a big year. And I end up falling on the side, getting knocked out of bounds, running. And, they at high school fields, they have the runway to the long jump pit, which has generally like a cement border of some sort. And then there's the sand, and it has cement around it, right? Well, I landed elbow first on the cement, and it cracked my elbow. And so I ended up missing the rest of the season. I came back late in the year for the last game or two, but I missed half the year. And so, that ended up being not the year I was hoping for. And as far as recruiting was concerned, everybody kind of fell off the map. Well, because of my junior year, I still got invited to the high school all-star game. So I went to the high school all-star game, Santa Clara County, San Jose area. And I went in as a quarterback, and there were 3 quarterbacks, myself and 2 other guys. The other 2 guys were more mobile, fast, runner type guys. And the offense that we were going to run was more of an option style of running quarterback offense in the all-star game. So I'm like, this is not my style. I'm not really that guy yet. And with 3 of us, we're only each going to get 1 quarter and a little bit more than a quarter. And I told the coach, I'm like, look, let me try to play another position. And I didn't even play another position in high school. And part of the reason why I didn't play like defense in high school was because the head coach was like, you're our starting quarterback. I don't want you to get hurt on defense, so you're not playing defense. Well, I was always a really good free safety because I had a knack for the ball. I had a quarterback's mind playing on defense. And if you've seen the way I play football, I play kind of with the toughness about me. Even though I'm not that big, I throw my body out there, right? And so that's how I was on defense. I was like a torpedo running around, and I knew where the ball was going, and I had those instincts. So I go over to defense on the second day of practice, and there's some all-star, all-league, all-section players on the defense side of the ball. By the end of the week, I'm the starting free safety, having beaten out the other guys. I go into the game. I pick off a pass. I'm making tackles at the line of scrimmage. I get it named MVP of the game. The game was a 0-0 tie. There was absolutely no offense, which was horrible. But I was on the defensive side, and I was part of that. And so, I get that kind of recognition. And I started to get some calls from some small schools, Division II, and they'd be like, hey, we saw you in the All-Star game. Love how you play the game. Love your instincts. We'd love for you to come join us type deal. And I was like, no, I'm going to go to Gavilan Junior College, and I'm going to play for my dad, and I'm a quarterback. I'm not really a safety. I'm going to go play quarterback for my dad, and we'll see what happens after that. So I go play 1 year for my dad, and after that 1 year, I had a decent – I was, I think, honorable mention All-American. I was second-team All-State, and we had a good season. And so he let colleges know, hey, if you're interested, he could transfer right now. He doesn't have to get his AA in 2 years at a JC. He could transfer after 1 year. So I had some offers from Utah, Wyoming, San Jose State were really my 3 main Division I offers. And San Jose was 30 miles from home. And I just felt like My parents get to still see me play. At the time, they had a competitive program. And so that really is what my decision was based off of.
Yeah. So what was it like playing in front of your family in college, and they can go go to the home games, and what was this like? What was just playing at home?
Oh yeah, every game was a bunch of family. My parents were known for their tailgates, and everybody would come and they'd be making a carne asada and carnitas and beans and rice and tortillas and doing the full-on Mexican tailgate. And, I would have 20 to 30 strong every game at the home games at San Jose State. My dad went to every single game. He had actually taken a leave of absence because he had had some heart issues. The next year after I had left to San Jose State, I was redshirting at San Jose State. My dad was still coaching at Gavilan. In the second game of the season, he had shortness of breath, was about to have a heart attack, went in to see the doctor, got checked up, had 5 arteries that were clogged. And this is back in 1990 when bypass surgery was just kind of starting out.
Right.
So he went in, they split his chest. He had a 5-way bypass and decided, hey, I'm going to take a break from coaching, a little leave of absence. But in the same sense, I'm going to be able to go watch my kid play. Because if he didn't stop coaching, he'd be coaching on Saturdays and I'd be playing on Saturdays. He wouldn't have seen any of my games. So he took a leave, and it ended up being the end of his career because I never stopped playing. I didn't stop playing for another 20 years once I started. And so he went to every single college football game, him and my mom. They traveled. That was a blessing. It truly was a blessing. I mean, I went through the ups and downs of San Jose State, going through 3 different head coaches in 3 years, having to learn 3 brand new offensive systems.
Wow.
So the inconsistencies caught up with us to where my senior year, we went 2-9. My sophomore year, we had a winning record. Junior year, winning record, competing for the league championship, generally with Fresno State. But senior year is like the wheels fell off. Our 3rd head coach in 3 years, it hurt recruiting. The systems were changing, and San Jose State couldn't overcome that, But that being said, I still had some shining moments. And one of those games my senior year was against Bill Walsh, who was coaching at Stanford. And Bill Walsh is a former San Jose State Spartan himself.
Right.
And so I played a lights out game against Stanford, and it came down to the final minute. And we're driving the ball. I think we were down 3. We're driving. I throw a deep crossing route, and it goes off my guy's hands, and it's intercepted. And so the game ends. They win. But after the game, he was interviewed, obviously, by the local papers, the media. And he commented, he said, that kid on the other side of the field, Garcia, he did some Joe Montana-like things today.
Wow.
And it was really from Bill Walsh, who had been the head coach of the Niners and took him to 3 Super Bowls, and all of the things that he accomplished with the players that he had, and Joe Montana being one of the great ones that he had, was an honor to be recognized in that sort of way. And so coming out of college, even though I had a tough year, I still was productive as a quarterback. We just struggled to stop teams and struggled to win games in the 4th quarter. But coming out of that year, I was still invited to play in the East-West Shrine game. And I really felt like this was a platform, along with some of the great players around the U.S., because at that time, the East-West Shrine game still had some credibility. It was one of the top, that and the Senior Bowl were the top college all-star games in the country. And I didn't get invited to the Senior Bowl, but at least I had the opportunity to play in the East-West Shrine game, which was played at Stanford University, which is right in my backyard as well. So, hey, the Garcia family was about 100 strong at that game. And the funny thing is, we're practicing that week at Stanford, and so Bill Walsh is still the coach at Stanford. So he's hanging out at the practices and coming by, and my dad sees him, and my dad goes, and this is after our practice, my dad goes, hey, Jeff, there's Coach Walsh. Why don't you go tell him thank you for the kind words that he said about you after your guys' game? And I'm like, okay, I'll go up to him and introduce myself and say hello and that sort of stuff. So I walk up to Coach. I'm like, hey, Coach. Hey, man, I just want to introduce, I'm Jeff Garcia. And he's like, I know who you are.
Right.
And I go, I just want to thank you for the words that you said after the Stanford San Jose State game. And he goes, you know what, Jeff? Hey, you're a hell of a player. And this Saturday, you're going to be the MVP of the game. And I'm like, whoa, okay, coach, I appreciate that, man. Thank you. And he's like, hey, you know, just be your best type deal. And that was the end of the conversation. Well, we go out that Saturday, and there's 2 quarterbacks on each team. The West has 2, the East has 2, and my teammate is a guy out of Idaho University. And Lavelle Edwards, the former head coach, great head coach from BYU, is kind of our head coach. So during the week of practice, I felt like I performed better than the other quarterback. His name was Doug Nussmeier. And so the end of the week comes, and Coach Edwards comes up to me and he goes, Jeff, don't take this the wrong way, okay? I'm going to start Doug, and I'm going to play him in the first and third quarter because I want you in the second and fourth quarter.
Yeah.
Because if the game's on the line, you run the offense better. And I want you in the game if it's a close call. And so the fourth quarter comes around, and we're down 28-7. So my second quarter wasn't anything productive. We're down 28-7 in the fourth quarter. Well, we put together 3 drives. I throw 3 touchdown passes. It's 28-27 with about a minute and a half left in the game, and we go for the 2-point play. And we're going toward the south end zone. All my family is in that end zone. And so the entire fourth quarter, we were going toward my family. They had their banners and signs and everything up, right? So we call a 2-point play, and I drop back. It's a pass. A little lane opens up. I hit it. I hit the lane. A D lineman from Notre Dame gets his hand on my shoulder, and I shrug out of it, and I freaking get into the end zone and score the game-winning, what essentially is the game-winning 2-point conversion. You know, my family's going nuts. My teammates are going nuts. You know, it was like such an awesome experience and feeling for me. The writers who vote on the MVP of the game had already put in their ballot prior to the touchdown and the 2-point conversion, and they had nominated the other quarterback from the East as the MVP. Well, they went back and changed. They did a recall, so to speak. So they gave out a co-MVP. So I ended up being co-MVP of the game. And, you know, Doug Nussmeier ends up getting drafted by the New Orleans Saints that year. It wasn't a great quarterback group coming out of college that year. The highly touted ones that were drafted in the first round were the guy out of Tennessee, went to the Washington Redskins at the time.
Oh.
And I'm drawing a blank on his name. It was like top 3 pick. And then Fresno State, Trent Dilfer.
Yeah.
Trent Dilfer he came out after his junior year. He's the number, I think, 5 pick in the first round to Tampa Bay, right? And then, you know, it was sporadic. And I'm at home. I'm wondering, am I going to get a call? I think I had an agent, but didn't really know much about agents or representation or who I needed in my corner.
Right.
I did have Bill Walsh in my corner. And prior to the draft, post-draft, so I don't get drafted. Yeah. I wasn't even invited to the NFL Combine, okay? So I don't go to the Combine. I don't get drafted. I go to Bill Walsh, and I ask Coach, I'm like, hey, Coach, at Stanford, I meet with him. I appreciate the words that you said about me. Is there any way that you can help me? You have a lineage of coaches across the National Football League that came through your coaching tree. You had Holmgren in Green Bay. You had a lot of coaches out there that had been a part of Bill Walsh's coaching staffs over the years. He's like, Jeff, I'm gonna put a letter together. I'm gonna send it out for you. I'd be more than happy to help you. Well, it doesn't lead to anything in particular. I get one call. It's from a guy who's the quarterback coach with the Green Bay Packers at the time, Steve Mariucci. Okay. I get a call from Steve Mariucci, and this is before cell phones. It's like he happens to call my apartment around campus and I'm home and the phone rings, So I answer it. He's like, hey, is this Jeff? And I'm like, yeah, this is Jeff. He's like, hey, this is Coach Mariucci from the Green Bay Packers. I'm the quarterback coach. He's like, look, Coach Bill Walsh reached out to Coach Holmgren and told us about you. And we're aware of you, but I just want you to know our situation, okay? We have a young quarterback in Brett Favre.
Right.
We have another quarterback in Mark Brunell. And we have our third quarterback is Ty Detmer. We're going to probably bring in a practice guy just for training camp, and he's going to hand the ball off, and at the end of camp, he's going to be released. Well, that guy ends up being Kurt Warner. So those were the four quarterbacks that they had in camp going into the 1994 NFL season. And he's like, look, if you have a chance to go to Canada and get some experience. And you never know what'll happen after that.
Right.
And I'm like, all right, Coach, I appreciate you reaching out to me, and we'll see what happens. Well, I was on what they call a negotiation list with the Calgary Stampeders.
Mm-hmm.
So what every Canadian Football League team has is a negotiation list, a neg list of American players coming out of American colleges with U.S. citizenship. Basically, it's not a draft, but each team, you can only be on one team's neg list. So Calgary had my rights. They hold a Canadian draft, but it's just to draft Canadian-born athletes into their league. So there's a quota, basically, of how many Americans and how many Canadians you can have on a Canadian Football League team. So that being said, Calgary was my team. So I ended up going up to Calgary. I barely make the team as the third quarterback, and it took a performance in a preseason game when I went in, once again, in the fourth quarter. I only had one quarter to play. It was the fourth quarter. I was competing against another rookie quarterback. Our starting quarterback was Doug Flutie, who had been in the league for a number of years. Our second string quarterback was a guy by the name of Steve Taylor, who had been in the league for 6 years up there, who was out of Nebraska, who was a good college quarterback, had a strong arm. He was a veteran of the CFL already, so he was the backup. So I'm competing with another rookie for the third string spot. Comes down to the first preseason game. Each quarterback got a quarter. I got the fourth quarter. I step into the game. It's 14-14. I put 2 touchdown drives together, 2 touchdown passes. We win 28-14, and that's what solidified my opportunity to be on the Calgary Stampeders, because going into that game, they were actually leaning toward the other quarterback. And when I talk to people about opportunistic and being ready for the opportunities in life, that you have to be prepared to strike when it happens, that was one of those moments. Because, hey, 25 years ago, I could have been cut from the Calgary Stampeders, and I'm maybe coaching or teaching at a high school back in Gilroy, California. Who knows? You know, but hey, the opportunity presented itself. I was able to take advantage of it. I was the backup number 3 that year. I didn't even see the field. I got 2 snaps in a blowout game late in the season. Most of the season, I didn't even dress. I was just a body on the sideline in civilian clothes. And going into the second year, I became the backup to Doug Flutie. And in that second year, midway through the season, 9th game of the year, Doug gets like a baseball pitcher's elbow situation where he has to get surgery on his elbow. And I take over. And I took over, and I, again, never looked back. You know, and the next year, they let Doug go to Toronto. I stayed as a starting quarterback in Calgary for the next 3 seasons. And, you know, eventually won a Grey Cup up there, was having a great life in Calgary. I wasn't making a lot of money. I was probably making a decent paycheck. If you're a college graduate coming out and landing just a normal job, I probably was making that kind of money, you know, normal stuff, right? But I was living the life, having a blast. I bought a home in Calgary. I bought a home in Gilroy after my second season in Calgary. So I'd made, you know, a couple decent investments with, you know, not a whole lot of money, but some decent. And I opened up a restaurant. Now that was the bad investment. But I opened up a Mexican food restaurant in Calgary because I wanted some Mexican food there. Anyways, we win the Grey Cup after my 5th season. And that's when things changed for me.
Yeah, what a career there. And you plus you won the Grey Cup MVP too. So that was another award there. And But explain to me your NFL experience. Obviously, you've played for a lot of different teams like the 49ers, Browns, Raiders, uh, and the Eagles 2 times. And especially, I want to start with the Eagles because what was it like just battling in the NFC East? And I call this the NFC least now. But what's it like? What was it like battling against my team and playing with Donovan McNabb? And
Oh yeah, I mean, when I went to Philly in 2006, I went to Philly because I was a little bit disgruntled, so to speak. I had 2 not so good years, one in Cleveland, then one in Detroit. And I just wanted to go to an organization that had a chance to win. And as we've seen through decades, that teams struggle to win in Cleveland. They struggle to win in Detroit. And it's just unfortunate because they're great sports towns. And if they ever got things going in the right direction, and Cleveland's playing better football now, but the city would go crazy, but unfortunately they were rough years for me. Great experiences, but rough years. And I just wanted to go somewhere where there was a chance to win. And Philadelphia, even though they were coming off of a not so good year in 2005 because Donovan got injured in 2005 as well, they had been to the Super Bowl in 2004. They had had years of winning under Andy Reid. And so, I didn't have a whole lot of offers to go places, but Philly seemed like a stable place for me. Even though it was hard to accept that I would be going in as a backup, that I wouldn't even have a chance to compete to start. And I had to swallow some pride a little bit there and accept that. And it was a tough thing to accept because I didn't like sitting on the bench watching. I want to be able to contribute. It's not like quarterbacks can go run down on special teams unless you're that guy from the New Orleans Saints who's kind of special in that way, but not everybody's like that. No. And so you don't get to really contribute anywhere else. Back in the day, quarterbacks used to hold for the extra point and field goal, but now the punters do that, so you're doing nothing. You're running the scout team offense during the week of practice, which you take pride in because you're preparing your defense for the upcoming game. But one thing that they knew about me in Philadelphia was that mentally I understood the offense. I studied the offense. I knew the offense. I could step in the huddle and confidently call the plays and execute the plays. Secondly, they knew I was a competitive SOB. Yeah. That, hey, when I wasn't on the practice field or in the film room, I was in the weight room getting my weight workouts in. I was trying to stay strong. Even though I was only 190 pounds soaking wet, I was trying to stay as strong as I could so that if the opportunity presented itself, I'm ready. I used to step into our huddles in training camp when I was running the number 2s against the number 1s when it was still open battles in a sense, but usually the number 2 offense would have to face the number 1 offense, right? And I'd step in that huddle. I'd go, look, hey, we're not second stringers here. Right. We're not the backups. We're 1A. We're 1A. They're 1. We're 1A. We're just a play away from being in the game as the number 1 guy. Right. That's how we're going to approach it. And Coach Reed would hear that. And I know he brought it up in a press conference years later. He's like, that Garcia, he didn't accept being a backup or a number 2. Yeah. And so I was supportive of Donovan, though. That's the thing, that don't misconstrue being competitive with being a shit disturber, so to speak. I was a full-on teammate. I wanted Donovan to succeed. I wanted to help him if I could in any way succeed. And, unfortunately for him, he tore his ACL in the 10th game of the season. And then it was my time. And, I took those last 6 games of the season and just tried to be the best that I could be for that team. Be a leader, be a guy who's going to minimize mistakes. He's going to give his weapons an opportunity to make plays. And we turned around a season that at the time when I stepped in, we were 5-5. We go to Indianapolis for my first start. The Colts end up winning the Super Bowl that year, so they had a pretty damn good team. And we put up some points, but it was a tough game. We couldn't stop Peyton and the Colts. And so that's my first start, and we lose. We come home on a Monday night against the Carolina Panthers, and it's a back-and-forth game, and we end up pulling that one out. And then we go on the road for 3 consecutive Eastern Division games on the road. And to be honest with you, that first start at home for me on Monday night against Carolina, there was a moment in the second quarter where I get picked up and body slammed by their big nose guard, right? 330 pounds coming down on my stomach. We were inside the red zone. We were like on the 10 to 15 yard line. I get just power driven like a WWE old school wrestling move into the turf, and I'm wrenching, trying to get my air, and I'm like loosening my pants, trying to get air because the wind was knocked out of me, right? And the backup quarterback, AJ Feely, who had been in Philly for a year or two before, and the fans knew him, gets up and starts warming up, and the fans start cheering, right? And I end up getting up. I don't come out of the game, but I'm pissed. I'm like, you know what, Eagle fans, you're going to like boo. You're going to be booing me and then cheering for the backup when I'm laying on the ground, rolling around in pain. Like this is fuel to my fire right here. So anyways, we turn it around. We win that game. And I actually was fired up about going on the road the next 3 weeks and playing against the NFC East. And it started in Washington. We go out to the Redskins, to JFK Stadium, 100,000 strong, and we put it on them. Then we go up to New York, and it was a Sunday night game on Fox, nationally televised game, and we put it on them. Oh. And then we go to Dallas, and it's a Monday, Christmas Day, doubleheader on Monday, Christmas Day. And we were the first game of the day. And we went out there, and we put it on them. And right then, hey, we were back in the race in the NFC East Division. And I said, Merry Christmas, Philadelphia. And we came back to Philly, and we played on New Year's Eve night, a Sunday night game again against the Atlanta Falcons and Michael Vick. And going into the game, if Dallas lost that day, we clinched the division. Dallas lost. We clinched before we even had to play. So I only played one series in the game, and then I came out. That being said, hey, we went on a ride. We won the first game in the playoffs against New York at home, the wild card game, but we hosted because we were the division champ. And then we went to New Orleans and lost a nail-biter, tough one by 3 to Drew and the guys out there. But, that was such a great run that we had at the end of the season, and such a great experience for me as a player coming in, and just the fans eventually embracing me and loving me, and hey, putting my T-shirt on the Rocky statue out there on the top of the steps. It was an awesome feeling. But it was only 1 year, and I'd only signed a 1-year contract, and so the Eagles were in a tough position. They're like, okay, we know that the fans like Garcia. He did a good job for us, but Donovan's been our guy for a number of years. We know what we have with Donovan, and it would be tough to have both quarterbacks in the building together. And I understood that. And so as much as I was open to taking on the role again as the backup, because I really loved my time in Philly, there was an opportunity for me to go to Tampa and be the starter. And here again was a team that was coming off of a 4-12 year in 2006, and playing with a rookie quarterback in Bruce Gradkowski. And so I came in and took over the head job, and we turned that season around, and we won the NFC South Division. And unfortunately, we lost the opening game of the playoffs to the Giants, who went on to win the Super Bowl that year. But, we had a great turnaround, and I had 2 consecutive winning years in Tampa. I went to the Pro Bowl in 2007. But here's the thing about me as well, just like what happened in San Francisco, going to 3 Pro Bowls in a row, leading that team to 2 playoffs, 1 division title. They're always looking for the bigger, better deal, and I'm not that guy that was the high round draft pick. I'm not that guy that walks off the bus and looks like Troy Aikman. Yeah. I'm more the style of quarterbacks that are showcasing their abilities today. I was 20 years ahead of my time, so to speak. I was like a Steve Young, but Steve Young had some stability with the 49ers and also had a great team around him. And at one time, I think when the Niners won the Super Bowl with Steve Young, their defense was the number one defense in the National Football League.
Wow.
And when you have an offense like what they had with Jerry Rice and Brent Jones and all the other guys contributing, the running backs, Roger Craig and Rathman, and the solid offensive line, and Steve, not taking anything away from Steve, great quarterback. But when you're able to shut teams down on defense and create great opportunities on offense, makes it a little easier to win football games. And they had a great team and a great thing going on in the 80s and 90s, and he was part of that legacy. But you know what? Unfortunately for me, I had to bounce around the league. I had to look for that next opportunity and take advantage of that opportunity. That being said, hey, in 10 years of really being a starter in the National Football League, I took 4 teams to playoffs. I won 3 division titles in 3 different divisions. Who's done that?
No,
you know? And so it's not my fault. I had to spend 5 years in the Canadian Football League because I was overlooked coming out of college. But hey, put my Canadian Football League stats with my NFL stats, and I'm right up there with the top 20 quarterbacks that ever played the game professionally. You know, and so I take a lot of pride in that. And it doesn't matter whether it was in Canada or in the NFL. Hey, guys are playing the game at a high level. Guys are trying to kill me. They're trying to take me out of the game. I had some longevity playing basically 17 years in professional football. And I had some great moments, great teammates, great experiences, great coaches that I still am in touch with. And so there's nothing that could replace that. And I'm fortunate to have lived it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously your career record, you won 161 games and over 83 losses, and that's amazing. And also, I want to get, obviously you played with a lot of great teammates throughout your career, and I want to get to the 49ers, and obviously you had a great receiving core there when you were playing, and you played with Jerry Rice, I think, and you played with T.O. and all these other great receivers. And what was it like just playing with them and in San Francisco?
Yeah, I mean, hey, it was incredible to play with 2 Hall of Famers like I was fortunate enough to play with. Now, Jerry was kind of at a transition period at that point when I got there. He was almost kind of handing the torch over to Terrell Owens.
Right.
And didn't mean that Jerry wasn't still that guy. I mean, he was still a dude, still a beast, and had such tremendous work ethic. You know, and that's why he had such longevity in the National Football League. The guy just dedicated himself to his fitness and his ability to bounce back from the contact, and just his health and how he took care of himself and how he prepared himself. And so he was a great leader on the team for all of us, not just the receiving core, but all of us on that team. But I ran into Jerry when I was in college at San Jose State, and I was 21 years old and wet behind the ears, and I saw him at a bar downtown San Jose. And I walked up to him. He was by himself. He was just chilling. And I said, "Hey, Jerry, how you doing, man? I'm Jeff Garcia. I'm the quarterback at San Jose State." He's like, "Oh, hey, nice to meet you, Jeff." And I said, "You know what? One day I'm going to be throwing the ball to you." He's like, he kind of chuckled. He said, "All right, man. Well, I wish you all the best," you know? And so when I joined the Niners in 99, I never brought it up. I didn't say anything about, "Hey, Jerry, I met you like 7 years ago in a bar in San Jose." I didn't say anything about it. But I did tell the story to like the media one time, just about my journey and my experiences, and, you know, how I thought I was probably more full of myself than I actually was back in college, and what I said to Jerry Rice, you know. And so they brought it up to Jerry and reminded him of it. But that being said, hey, to play with Jerry was awesome. To have 2 years with him and kind of be a part of his send-off, unfortunately, him going on to the Oakland Raiders after that.
Yeah.
But just blessed to be around him for a couple seasons. And then T.O., the guy was a beast. He was a difference maker.
Yeah.
All you had to do was get the ball in his hands. Like today, they talk about YAC, yards after contact, and he was that guy. He was the YAC specialist. That guy could just turn a 8-yard slant into an 80-yard touchdown run. And that's what the Niner receivers were known for. And Jerry Rice was that guy too. He would turn little passes into big plays. Steve Taylor, or John Taylor, back in the day, wide receiver. But T.O. was a mismatch, a matchup nightmare for
Yeah.
defenses. And, you know, for the 5 years that we played together, we had, I thought, some great seasons. They weren't always happy times together.
Right.
We didn't always see eye to eye and get along the best in the locker room. That being said, I tried to maintain a professional approach to our relationship and knew that I needed him on the field to perform. And I wanted him to be his best.
Right.
And I didn't want the negativity that was festering, so to speak. And we've gotten past that over the years, and we've had a heart-to-heart, so to speak, back around 5 years ago. And when he was actually trying to make a comeback and got signed by the Seattle Seahawks, we had a talk prior to that, and he actually apologized, saying, hey, I'm sorry for some of the things that were said or that people were led to believe about you. And I said, yeah, man, you know what? I accept your apology. It's water under the bridge. But yeah, at the time, it didn't feel good. It didn't feel good to have to deal with certain accusations that I knew were false, that I knew weren't true about me. But I also knew who I was, and I wasn't going to let somebody else dictate and create an image of me that was not really who I was. And I have nothing against people's choices and the direction that they want to go in their lives, but I just knew that that was not me and what I wanted to choose in my life. And I was actually dating a girl that I would end up marrying and having 4 beautiful children with, and starting a blessed secondary life after football with children and being a dad and being a part of their lives.
Yeah, so obviously Terrell Owens, he had a great career with us too. I was happy that he played with the Cowboys too, and obviously he played with the Eagles. But you still
he was there that Christmas Day on the Cowboys side of the field when the Eagles put it on him.
So do you still keep in touch with him, or you guys are good, clear the air? Or
the air is clear. I mean, like I said, everything's fine. I've seen him at a couple functions over the past couple years. I went to his Wall of Fame, Ring of Honor introduction at the San Francisco 49ers Stadium, putting him into the San Francisco 49er Hall of Fame. I was there for that presentation to support him, along with there were probably 15 to 20 ex-teammates of his that were there. And so, yeah, man, it's like, hey, I want nothing but the best for the guy. I want him to have a great secondary career, whatever that may be, or if he just is enjoying retired life, good for him.
Yeah, I'm working on getting him on the podcast too, but it's kind of hard. But yeah, but my next question:
certain guys, when they want to give their time, they feel like their time is worth something, as far as, and it's worth something to all of us. But it's tough when you're your own guy and somebody is only going to probably want some money in his pocket if he's going to speak, and I'm not saying that's him, but I'm sure it's tough to get some of these guys that are on higher platforms because of the expectation. If they're going to do something, they're going to get paid for what they do,
Yeah. So my next question to you is, I want to ask you, obviously you coach too, after your career, and what was it like just being a coach and teaching these young kids, to become better athletes in their career?
Yeah, I've been fortunate. It started about 8 years ago. I was now retired. I was trying to think, what can I do now? I'm still young. I'm still active. I want to have some impact on people. So I started coaching young quarterbacks in the San Diego area where I live. I live in North San Diego. And I started coaching the junior high and the high school kids, which then led to college and some pro quarterbacks coming to train with me in San Diego. And that was all about one-on-one or small group training. And I was into it because I still loved to compete and get out there and drop and throw and run the drills and go through the drills, the footwork drills and all that stuff. Well, I got a call from the Montreal Alouettes after I had just finished kind of my last training with my kids. They were all going back to their seasons in high school and stuff. And I got a call from Montreal, and they wanted me to come in as a consultant to their offense. They were struggling. They were 1-5 at the time, I think. And Troy Smith from Ohio State Heisman Trophy winner was their quarterback, but they were not playing good offense. And so I accepted something that was labeled as a week-to-week gig, right? So I went up to Montreal thinking I'd be there for a week, be a fly on the wall, be able to give some feedback to the coaching staff, and then be out of there. Come back home because we had 4 kids that were young. And my wife at the time she had her hands full, And so I go out there a week. We lose that next game. We're 1-6 or 1-7. And the head coach had already fired the offense coordinator in training camp. So the quarterback coach had been promoted to OC in the middle of training camp. So then after that 7th game of the season, they fire the wide receiver coach. So they asked me, Jeff, we know you're here as a consultant, but will you coach the quarterbacks and let our offensive coordinator just handle the offensive coordinator duties and you coach the quarterbacks? And I'm like, whoa, that's a whole different thing now. That means I'm going to be here for the remainder of the season, and I don't know how my wife's going to take that. Well, that being said, I couldn't turn it down. I really was passionate about it. I loved working with the young players.
Right.
And I loved the connection and chemistry that I had with them because they saw me as one of them. They saw me as a guy who's been there, done that, and they want to be like that. They saw me as someone who's worn the cleats, who's taken the hits on the field and bounced back up, who knows what it's like to stand in the pocket and be in a 2-minute drill. And so there was immediate respect from the players, and that felt good. That was a good thing. I loved that camaraderie. It brought me back to how I felt playing the game, being in the locker room with my teammates, having that camaraderie, that mentality that we're brothers, that we're going to battle for one another. And so we ended up turning the season around. We went through a couple different quarterback changes, ended up being a real positive year, made the playoffs, almost made the Grey Cup, lost the game to go to the Grey Cup. And I knew that this was something that I wanted to continue to do. And so I just didn't want to do it in Canada. I wanted to do it in the NFL. So I got an agent. He reached out to teams, and Jeff Fisher of the Rams at the time gave me an interview, ended up hiring me on, but he had already hired a quarterback coach.
Right.
And so he's like, look, I want you on our staff. I love your energy. I love your knowledge. I love what you represent. I'm going to create a position for you, and we're going to get this done. Okay. So I waited a couple months, and he brought me on as an assistant to the receiver coach. So I was in the receiver room working with the receivers, which was actually a good thing because those guys needed to hear what a quarterback's mindset is and what his thoughts are when a play is going on and why the ball may not go to you. And so I was able to explain that and get them to understand that, hey, precision is important. Your route depth, the timing, how it correlates with the drop of the quarterback. It all ties in. And it's important that you can't cut routes short. You can't take routes too long. There's a certain time element that's combined with the process. That being said, what was disappointing about the whole coaching situation was that the quarterbacks really struggled on the team. And at the time, the quarterbacks were Nick Foles, who was in his first year with the team, and Case Keenum, first year as well with the team. Well, the Rams had a pretty damn good defense. They had that D-line with Aaron Donald and Brockers and some other guys and a good group of linebackers and a pretty decent group of defensive backs. So defensively, they were a pretty solid crew. Had a stud of a running back that had just come out, first-year rookie, Todd Gurley.
Yeah.
Ends up being rookie, offensive rookie of the year that year. But quarterback-wise, and can't take away from, hey, we don't have the weapons. The weapons were good enough. The opportunities for completions were there. But they didn't always know where they needed to go with the football. And they were running a West Coast offense, which I was very familiar with. But you had some disconnect going on in that quarterback room. And I would have loved for the coaching staff to recognize certain things and say, hey, we got a quarterback in this building that ran the West Coast offense his entire career, ran it pretty well, knows how to play the game. And I don't expect him to coach our quarterbacks, but let's bring him into the room for film study and review twice a week so that he could give his comments to the quarterbacks. Our quarterback coach was Chris Wenke. Now, Chris at least had an NFL career, but it wasn't a very productive one. And he never really was a West Coast offense kind of guy. I knew the terminology. I knew the progressions. I knew the footwork. I knew how it had to coincide in order to be productive. That being said, Case Keenum was a little bit more like a Jeff Garcia, undersized, scrappy, smart. He kind of got it a little bit more than Nick Foles, but Nick Foles was the big free agent signing for them that year at the quarterback position. So they felt like he needed to be the starter. Well, it took some time to realize that he wasn't the best option on the team. Case ran the offense better and needed to be on the field. And actually, toward the end of the year, when Case did go on, we won 4 straight at one time. Season team ended up being an 8-8 team, but they were capable of being better had the quarterback play been better.
Yeah, man. Obviously, Nick Foles won a Super Bowl, and he's still going at it in Chicago. And he's a great quarterback, and everywhere he goes, he wins. So that's a I'm sure that you have
almost everywhere he goes, he wins.
Yeah,
because he didn't win in St. Louis. Okay, yeah. And I don't blame Nick. Somebody needed to coach Nick up on what are you seeing in your pre-snap read before the ball is even snapped. What is the defense doing?
Yeah, that's
going to start to give you an idea of where you're going to go with the football. Don't be surprised when the ball is snapped. Now you got to find a guy. It does not work like that. If that's how you're going to operate playing quarterback, you're going to struggle. You're going to fail. Right. Now, in the West Coast system that he had gone to in Kansas City under Andy Reid, and then in Philadelphia under their head coach who was with Andy Reid in Kansas City, and he had success in Andy Reid's offense in Philly prior to ever leaving Philly.
Right.
So he got to go back to something which surprises me that he didn't run our West Coast in St. Louis better. And that being said, hey, that year that he stepped in for Wentz and Philly, he was magical. And I thought they did a great job of game planning for him in doing some of the things like the RPOs, the run pass options that he started to kill teams on. And he just, in that Super Bowl, was magical. The guy could not miss. He made some great throws down the field and made some great reads and delivered. And he delivered that Super Bowl for Philly, and it was great to see that city finally get that title and that trophy to celebrate.
Yeah. So I do this fun little segment now with all my guests that come on the show. It's called the Rapid Fire segment. But before we get to that, I want to bring something up that so I was watching the Herd Show last week, and I know you've been getting a lot of questions about this as a Cam Newton situation. I just want to bring that up to you and see what the reason was behind that. But I think you were criticizing the way he dresses, and Cam Newton said he agrees with you, but he's not going to change the way he dresses. So explain to me, what do you say to the critics or whoever's criticizing you, and what do you say to that?
First of all, the criticism is all about the play on the field.
Yeah.
The guy's got tremendous style. He's very flamboyant. I don't know if that's the word to use. He's forward thinking in how he dresses, and he can own it, and he does own it. That being said, my comments were more from a self-experience in the sense that when things aren't going well on the field,
right,
when I'm not playing or performing to my best, or things are a struggle, which I've experienced in Cleveland, in Detroit, the last thing that I wanted to do was bring any more attention to myself off the field. And that's where it was. People wanted to turn it into, what's his clothes got to do with his performance? No, it's not about that. You're going to dress like a king, play like a king on the field.
Right.
I'm not telling you to change your style of dress, how you approach the game, how you approach going into the stadium, but how are you approaching the game mentally? Are you doing what's necessary to prepare yourself to be the best player on the field, the best leader on the field for your team, the guy who's going to execute the offense to the best of his ability, or are you just showing up? Yes, you're 6'5", you're 245 pounds. You're the God-given prototype of what a quarterback should look like, because you're not only the Troy Aikman lookalike of the 80s and 90s that everybody wanted, but you also have the athletic ability of the Michael Vicks and the Russell Wilsons to escape, to lengthen plays, to put tremendous pressure on defenses. But if you're not executing the offense to your maximum potential, that's where the issues were with me, or what lied with me. And yes, I was showing a picture of his clothing, how he went up to the game that day. Granted, we're a 49er affiliated station. The Niners just whooped him. He just threw 3 interceptions. He had a tough day out on the field. And my comments were more about my own self-reflection as to when I went to the stadium, I didn't want to bring any more attention to myself. And that's what it was about. Hey, own your style. I get it. He does that. And hey, he looks great. But hey, turn things around on the field. Be great on the field. And yeah, people want to say, oh, Garcia, who are you? Hey, Cam went to a Super Bowl. Cam was MVP. Yeah, Cam was the #1 player taken in the National Football League when he came out in the draft. I wasn't drafted. I wasn't even sniffed by the NFL. I had to go to Canada, prove myself for 5 years. But you know what? I forged my way back into getting into the NFL. I went out and I battled being 6 feet, 190 pounds, undrafted, unliked, unlooked at. And I earned it. 4 Pro Bowls, 3 division titles, 4 playoff runs. Yeah, I didn't go to the Super Bowl. But you know what? I took a 4-12 team in Tampa and turned them into a NFC South division title winner. And they haven't been to the playoffs since. It's been 12, 13 years. And they'll probably get there now because they have a hell of a leader. And what's the difference between New England last year and this year? Every team's struggling with injuries. Yeah, they don't have the receiving core. They don't have the running backs. But tell me, outside of Edelman and Gronk, and flashes of one guy in, Randy Moss for a season, one guy here for a season. Hey, Tom Brady makes people better around him because he approaches the game with the mentality that I'm going to study, I'm going to prepare, and I'm going to be the best player on the football field. And I'm going to elevate everybody else's game around me. And I feel like that was my approach. I'm out there to elevate everybody else's game around me because I expect the best out of me. And I'm going to climb that mountain. I'm going to be the best that I can be. And I'm going to throw blows with whoever. And I'm going to be a bad, tough SOB. And that's just my chip on my shoulder. And I didn't expect it or mean it to come across as a black-white issue because it's not about that. I'm Mexican.
Yeah.
You want to talk about people that have been oppressed and have been shit on and who have had to deal with some hard times as well in their own lives and who are out there picking the fruits and vegetables that you buy in the grocery market because nobody else wants to go out there and pick them. You know what? Hey, I know what that's all about. And maybe I didn't personally feel it and have to deal with it, but I know what it's about. And in no way am I that guy. I have great friends, best friends who are of all colors, and I'm colorblind is how I look at it. And it hurt in that way that people wanted to turn it into a race issue, which it had nothing to do. It was all about the play on the field. Going into the game, he had 2 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. He was not playing great football. Since his Super Bowl run, he's lost more than he's won. Yeah. And he had the fortunate opportunity to be with the same team throughout most of his career and then join a team that's been nothing but great. They've been Super Bowl champs as recently as 2 years ago. They've been in the playoffs every single year, but maybe one in the last 20. So what's happening? That's what That's where it was coming from. And I don't want to disrespect Cam in any sort of way. But you know what? Sometimes, hey, the truth needs to be said.
Right.
That's my feeling. That's what as somebody in the media, I'm put on a stage to be able to speak my mind, and I spoke my mind.
Right.
And hey, I have tremendous respect for him and his abilities, for how he dresses. I just haven't seen what I feel like I need to see on the football field, and that's what it comes down to.
Yeah. So before I let you go, you ready for this segment? 3 or 4 question segment?
Sure.
All right. Thoughts on my Dallas Cowboys? What can they do to fix this situation? It's like obviously we lost Dak Prescott, Andy Dolan, and now Ben DiNucci from yesterday.
You know, it might be a starting all over for them going into next season. Let's be honest. It looks like the running back is pretty much given up. They've got tremendous weapons. Okay, they have probably the best young core of receivers in the National Football League. Obviously, they don't have the protection up front. They've struggled defensively for years now. So they need to fix that problem. And Dak Prescott, as much as I believed he was the future of this team, he's going to be coming back from a very serious injury. They did not pay him the big dollars because he did not want to agree to what the offer was. And they may just have to start all over with a young guy. They're going to be in a position to draft a young guy that they can develop, that once again, they're not going to have to dish out $120 to $200 million to, and they can build a team around that young kid. I don't know. I don't have the answer, but it looks awful out there. It looks awful throughout the NFC East.
Right.
But Dallas is going through a lot of problems. I expected more out of Mike McCarthy coming in as the head coach to turn that around, to really create an edge and a nastiness in that team, and it hasn't happened.
Thoughts on
and I am available to play quarterback if they'd like to give me a
All right, actually, you know what? I'm gonna make that happen. Jeff Garcia as a Cowboys quarterback.
We'll have a workout.
And you can be our head coach too at the same time.
Player coach. You know, that's the thing. You have John Kitna and Kellen Moore on the staff who both played quarterback. I'm waiting for one of those guys to suit up, you know? So, I mean, it may just come down to that.
Thoughts on Jimmy Garoppolo, real quick?
Yeah, Jimmy's going through some problems. And I think it stems from his development in New England, where he ran a New England style of offense. And I'm not saying that it has shortchanged him in any way, because he grew up watching one of the all-time greats in Tom Brady operate the game. And I see a little bit of those same characteristics, but now you're in a system that operates differently. And like I talked about the West Coast offense, and Shanahan's offense is a spinoff of the West Coast style of offense. It's based upon timing, and you have to have your footwork going in the right direction at the right time and be able to deliver the ball and throw players open. The last thing that you can do in the National Football League is wait for a guy to get open and then try to throw him the football, because you're going to be too late. The window of opportunity is too small. Players are too good, too fast on the defensive side. They will snatch that ball away from you. The other thing is you got to stretch the defense every once in a while. You have to take a shot, even if it's an incompletion. You got to give your guy a chance when you see the right matchup and the right opportunity to throw the ball down the field. He doesn't take shots down the field. So what does the defense do? They start to really come up tight. They start to come up tight. And if you're not getting your skill guys the ball in space, it's tough for them to maneuver and create. And now looking at the New England game and the game the week before against the Rams, great game plan. The first series of the game, Jimmy maybe threw one ball that was past the line of scrimmage. Other than that, they were shovel passes and quick screens out to the sideline. Utilized the entire 52 yards of the field. They controlled the ball. They had the ball 38 minutes in both those games. the defense didn't have to come on the field and stop the quarterback and the offensive power from the Rams. And then Cam Newton, he was his own worst nightmare against the 49ers. He struggled. So that being said, they were productive. Well, they go into Seattle against the number 32nd ranked defense in the National Football League. And even though they were going through injuries like every team is, losing Deebo Samuels was big. And then losing their third running back in Jeff Wilson didn't help. But I felt like there was enough talent to be productive, especially when you're going against a defense that's been giving up 29, 30 points a game. And they could just never get it going. And he just looked off, and they could talk about, hey, his high ankle sprain, it's still bothering him. Has not grown or improved or progressed since coming to the team 3 years ago when he stepped onto the field and all of a sudden the team won 5 games in a row. And then, he suffers the injury the next year. And then the next year he leads them to the playoffs. But hey, they had one of the top, if not the top rushing games in the National Football League. And they had one of the top 5 defenses in the National Football League. You have a top 5 defense and you run the ball in the top 5, it makes your game as a quarterback a lot easier. You still got to make throws. You still got to make plays. But that being said, now it's on your shoulders to make up for the lack of players that you have around you. You got to be good with the football, and he's not being good with the football.
Yeah, so the last few things here, I'm going to put this together. The first one is, do you see Andy Reid winning the Super Bowl again this year? And would you like to say anything to all the nurses, doctors, and essential workers?
Okay, say that again about Andy. I got the Andy Reid thing, but what was the next thing?
Would you like to say anything to all the nurses, doctors, and essential workers?
Oh, okay. From the standpoint of Andy Reid, again, he's got a great team, great quarterback, and skill around him. They're highly explosive. Defensively, they're hit or miss, but they'll win shootouts. They can score with anybody. And so, yeah, they're a team that can repeat. When you look at the AFC, and I'm trying to think, who's in the AFC that can really contend with Kansas City. And, you look at Pittsburgh. Baltimore obviously lost a tough one to Pittsburgh. But you have some teams like Pittsburgh who plays great team defense. And as much as you think the high-powered offenses are going to overcome great defense, oftentimes great defense wins. And Pittsburgh's got a pretty good offense too. They're playing pretty well on the offense side of the ball. So there are some teams that can contend with Kansas City. But Andy's such a great coach. His players love him. They'll do anything for him. They're going to be there in the end. It's just going to come down to one of those games. Who's going to have the better game? Is it going to be Pittsburgh? Is it going to be a Baltimore? Is it going to be a surprise team? I don't think it's going to be Tennessee. They seem to be falling off. And I don't know if Buffalo's as good as they would like to believe. So, it's one of those things. We'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah.
As far as, the first responders, the doctors, the nurses, all of the people out there that have helped us deal through these troubling times, I really praise their efforts, their mentality to put others first, not worry about their own health as well as their own families, because they all have families and they're putting themselves in harm's way, being exposed to the potential of this deadly disease. And so I praise them. I thank them. I appreciate them. I hope that we can find an answer to this pandemic very soon and get back to living life, because this country flourishes off of sports, work ethic, drive, and being committed to something. And if you take sports away, if you take our daily jobs away, if you take kids out of the classroom and stuff them in rooms behind computers, behind electronics, as much as that's the world that we live in today, it's consuming them in a negative way. And I hope that we can get through this. And I'm very grateful and thankful for all those people that are helping us do that.
Well said. And there it is, episode 583, longer than expected. Great conversation. I learned a lot from this conversation, and such an inspiration. And thank you again for coming on. And you're doing great as in the community, and obviously covering the 49ers games. And you and your family stay safe. And like I said, I'll be posting this on all social media formats, and I'll be sending you the link so you can post it too. But thank you again, and keep up the great work.
All right, man. You got it. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah,
You
no
take
problem.
care.
Yep.